Hi folks, and welcome to Christian Connections. Marlon and Ganem couldn't be here tonight with us, but filling in for them are the eminent professor, chaplain, and, Dr. Leigh Aveling, who we all know. And with us, our special guest tonight is Pastor Aren Rennacker from the Calamasa Church.
Yeah.
And he's going to have a very interesting and somewhat different message for us tonight and discussion, very relevant. And we also have a familiar group who has become very popular on LLBN. And Leigh, you want to introduce them for us?
Yeah, thank you, Derrell. I'm always curious when I see a name, and I looked at the word map, and I thought, what does that mean? And I asked Josh, one of the musicians behind me, and he said it's music with a purpose. Basically, the goal of their group is to lead people to Jesus. And so music with a purpose is a map with the idea of doing that. So we have Josh, Mia, and Joe. Josh and I believe Joe are high school students, 9th grade, and Mia is just winding up junior high. And they're going to play for us their own music. I always like to find out where the music came from, and I Googled it, but my Google results didn't show up in terms of their names. And so when I asked Josh, he said that the three of them came up with it. They're high school students, they love Jesus, and they love music. So go ahead.
In this world that we live in today, we have seen all the goodness you've made, all the trials we may have to face, and I fall to my knees and say, so give God the glory for things he hath done. Praise to the Father, the Spirit, and Son. To him be the glory, dominion, forever, amen.
thank you, Josh, Mia, and Joe. We'll hear from them again later in the program. Derrell.
This was the first sermon of the night in music. The message of it was a full sermon to me.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Yes.
Very well done.
And so Pastor Aren will be giving us the second message of the night. And the topic is lessons from our youth.
Yeah, very excited. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm truly grateful to be able to be speaking here at Christian Connections this evening, and I want to again affirm what a beautiful job that was by MAP, and incredible that 3 young people who are just beginning high school and could perform so beautifully. So thank you. And that actually goes extremely well with what I'll be speaking about tonight. I have the privilege of honestly saying 4 words that mean so much in our culture. I love my job. I work as a youth and young adult pastor, which basically means I get to walk alongside of young people as they navigate their social, mental, emotional, and spiritual journeys. It is so much fun. Now, I wasn't always planning on doing what I'm doing, which is something you often find pastors saying. For me, I was halfway through college when I began to have experiences that were pulling me towards ministry, a career I initially wasn't really considering. And once I started to feel that pull, I knew that this was about fulfillment. I realized that becoming what I initially wanted to do, a sports writer, may not provide the same fulfillment that a life of ministry could. But it wasn't just ministry that I was interested in. I was specifically interested in youth ministry, because I knew what a pivotal and often challenging time our teenage years can be. If you think back to your teenage years, what were they like? I know that mine included questions, heartbreak, and confusion, but thankfully also included strong mentors who helped me through each of those things. I was baptized as a teenager. I learned to love and appreciate life and people and church as a teenager. And so I decided that I wanted to have the opportunity to provide the same to others. And since then, I've done youth and young adult ministry for 8 years now. The first 5 were at the Oceanside Seventh-day Adventist Church in San Diego, and the past 3 I've been at the Calamasa SDA Church locally here in Riverside County. And it has been a tremendous experience. I have enjoyed every single moment of it. But interestingly, what I thought would happen was I would get to impart and bestow great wisdom to these young people. When in reality, if I'm honest, I believe the young people have taught me more than I have taught them. When you think of a young person, the image of possibly apathy or disregard might come to mind. Maybe you'll picture a young person holding a cell phone in their hands and having headphones in their ears. And while that certainly does happen, I also want to say that my experience in youth ministry has taught me that young people can really surprise us with their thoughts, with their ideas, and with their hearts when we allow them the opportunity to express those things. We know that Paul wrote to Timothy, "Do not let anybody look down on you because you are young, but rather be an example to the believers in speech, in conduct, in faith, and in purity." And I truly believe that example is being set today. Now, we know that the Bible portrays God as not only including young people, but often choosing them, elevating them, and using them as purveyors of God's messages and often radical plans. We think of Miriam. We think of David. We think of the young King Josiah. We think of the disciples. One of the lesser known examples is Naaman's young maid in 2 Kings chapter 5. She was from Israel, but had been taken against her will into Aram, and now served Naaman's wife. Imagine those circumstances. A child taken from their home to go and be a servant. And yet, this young woman chooses to respond in love and mercy to her foreign captors. She learns that Naaman has leprosy and speaks up to tell Naaman's wife in verse 3, "If only my master would see the prophet in Samaria, he would be able to heal him of leprosy." And that is what Naaman does. He goes and sees that prophet, whose name was Elisha. And Elisha not only heals Naaman, but brings him to the God of Israel. All because Naaman was willing to listen to the voice of a young, marginalized girl. We know that God often spoke through young people in the Bible. And I believe, based upon my experience, God continues to do that today. It is up to us to be willing to listen. And so I would like to share with you all today 3 things that I have learned from young people in my time as a youth pastor. And perhaps they will provide some education for some of you as well. And the first is that young people care. That image of apathy that I mentioned, frankly, just doesn't line up with what I have experienced in working with young people these past 8 years. Young people care deeply about God, about church, and about life. I have youth come up to me all the time with ideas for church, new, different, radical ideas. I have young people often come up to me and request baptism. And my personal favorite, I often have young people come up to me with deep, beautiful questions about life and about God. And frankly, it can be us adults who can unintentionally create apathy when we disregard their ideas or when we push their questions aside. Last year, one of my co-pastors at Calamasa came up with an idea for a sermon that we could do together. A sermon that would encourage multi-generational conversation. And I loved the idea. And it was a simple one. This was it. We were going to, in the weeks leading up to the sermon, survey the youth in our church and the adults in our church of all different generations, and ask them a few questions that would help us understand what it was that they wanted the other group to understand about them. And the responses we got were remarkable. So many youth said they wished the adults understood that while their journey with God and church might look a little bit different than theirs, such as maybe their dress or their worship music or how they enjoy Sabbath or many other things, it doesn't mean that they don't care deeply about their spiritual journeys and are always working to strengthen them. Conversely, the adults shared something that I also found deeply meaningful. They wanted the youth to understand that they too are on a journey, that they are not perfect and are still works in progress. What a beautiful message for them to share with each other. And that leads to the second thing that youth have taught me, and that is that young people love connection. Now that may come as no surprise, especially with the revelation of social media within our culture. But I'm not speaking about just with their peers. We learn that young people truly desire relationships with people of older generations once they know it's safe to do so. One youth wrote in our survey, "A lot of us would have fun and want to talk with older generations and learn things that they have learned. There just aren't always opportunities for that to take place." Another said, "I wish that people didn't focus so much on the outside and how we appear to be, but on how we love others and love God." The overarching theme in these answers was simple. It was, don't judge us, but please do walk beside us. And that, of course, sounds nice, but easier said than done, right? And so how do we create opportunities for intergenerational relationships? How do we have chances to walk beside young people today? And of course, I think the answers will vary with different people, with different communities and different churches. But I will say I have found one method that is a tried and true way to build relationships with younger people, and that is to step into their world. I remember one particular young person that I was hoping to have a stronger connection with and build a greater relationship with in one of my youth groups. And that was for two reasons. One, he was a very quiet young man, and so it had been hard to establish a rapport together. But also because he was going through a hard time in his life, and I was aware of that. And so I thought, how can I connect with him? Well, I knew one thing about him, and that was that he had a particular passion, and that was ornithology, the love of birds. He loved to birdwatch. Me? I had never been birdwatching in my whole life. I knew nothing about it. But I wanted to connect with him, and so I stepped into his world. And I asked if we could go birdwatching together. And he said, of course. And so we picked a day and a park and walked around to look at birds. Now, this young man knew every bird. He could name every single species. It was so impressive. And as I said, me, not so much. So I was desperate to find birds to point out and make it a really positive experience for the two of us. We were walking together, and I saw one. And I pointed up, I said, "Wow, what kind of bird is that?" And he looked, and he said, "Crow." Well, I felt kind of silly about that one, but he was nice about it. We kept walking a little further, talking a little bit. I saw another thing flying in the sky. I said, "Wow, what's that one?" And he looked up, and he said, "Airplane." Well, it wasn't going too well for me, but I was making the effort, and he knew that and appreciated it. And by the end of our bird watching time, we sat at a table and had the deepest conversation we had had to that point, including about some of his hardships. I had stepped into his world, and it made all the difference. When we take the first step towards young people, it can mean so much. And when we do so with encouragement, even better. This lesson was also reinforced for me during a car ride I had with a group of siblings from my previous youth group. And I asked them what it is they wanted to do when they grew up. And they said that they wanted to be professional musicians, much like our musicians today. But I think the words they used were rock stars. They wanted to be rock stars. Now, my initial thought as I was driving was to be protective and say, well, slow down, what's your backup plan? But instead what I said was that I think that's awesome, and that I could see them really doing that because they were very talented. The response I got back was, "Thank you, Pastor Aren. It means so much to hear you affirm us and encourage us. Most of the time, people only say, well, what's your backup plan? So thank you for believing in us." And that taught me, again, the importance of supporting our young people, believing in them and encouraging them in their unique journeys. One of our youth wrote in their survey, "It would be nice if we could figure out a way for younger generations to get to know older generations better and realize that we have some common ground and can really help each other out." Isn't that true? Finally, I've learned that young people have a lot to teach us. As we may know, young people don't often see God or church or the world in the exact same way as we do. And there are times that I feel I need to provide some teaching to them, but there are more times that I need to sit and learn from them. For example, young people today love doing acts of service. And the more creative, the better. And the bigger impact, the better. Another thing is that young people love to include as many people as possible and often don't worry as much about who belongs and who doesn't. And I know that oftentimes as we get older, myself included, these are things I can struggle with a little bit. And so young people are teaching me an important lesson that I believe comes from God. So perhaps God is still speaking today through our young people. David Kinnaman is an author who works for the renowned Barna Research Group. And he recently wrote a book called You Lost Me, about retaining our young people in Christianity and within our churches, something I'm sure many of us are very interested in. And I'd like to read a short excerpt from that book. He writes, "Flourishing intergenerational relationship should distinguish the church from other cultural institutions. Rather than being defined by segregated age groups, however practical they may seem, I believe we are called to connect our past, tradition, and elders with our future, the next generation." And we know that young people are not just the future of the church, they're also the present, today. And that's something I often need to remind myself. But thankfully, when I have trouble remembering, the Bible can provide that reminder. I think of Psalm 100, verse 5, which reads, "For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues throughout all generations." So may we take that to heart and continue to create opportunities to be with each other, to listen to each other, to grow with each other. And so again, those three things that I have learned is that youth care deeply, that youth love connection and desire relationship with all generations, and that youth, well, they have a lot to teach us. The final quote I'll share from our survey from a young person is this: "If we talked a lot and listened to each other a lot and got really curious about each other's stories, that would be an amazing thing. And who knows what might come of that." I couldn't have said it better myself. So may we create opportunities to connect with each other and build intergenerational relationships. May we seek out ways where we can mutually edify each other. And may we always be open to whomever God is using to teach us and grow us. Let's close with prayer. God, thank you for our young people. Hearing the beautiful music from MAP today is a reminder of how early you bestow gifts upon us. And I pray that you will help us to remember, to acknowledge that, to consider our young people as your messengers, yes, in the future, but right now as well. Thank you that you are a God who works through all of us in so many wonderful ways. And thank you for using young people to connect us and grow us. May we all have ears to hear. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, thank you, Pastor Rennacker. A lot of good reminders there. And also, listening to you, I had to think about the fact that a lot of those things that you were mentioning, you know, connection, togetherness, and so forth, were things that I can remember from when I was a kid, when I was young. There's the desire for that, and the passion, and a little bit of respect.
Yeah.
And it goes a long ways.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Leigh?
Well, we have our MAP musicians performing again, and they're performing one of their own compositions. Just an incidental here, they're very involved in their own local church. They're a pastor's delight, Aren.
I believe it, yeah.
And I'm impressed that they make up their own music. And the music is good. Go ahead.
saw him slowly walking, blood pouring from his wounded head. Saw the people, heard the shouting, his feet trailing blood from down the streets. And oh, it should have been me. And oh, it should have been me instead. Then I saw him with the cross upon his back. He was alone among the people. They were laughing at Jesus, the Son of God, our King. And oh, it should have been me. And oh, it should have been me instead. The Lord is my shepherd, he never forsakes me.
And Lord,
He gives me the power
it
to
should have
overcome
been
sin.
me.
When life seems to matter, I can feel him within. Oh, it should have been me. It should have been me. It should have been me instead.
Should have been me. Wonderful title. Thank you, Map. And Derrell, I guess you'll be having him on again sometime in the future.
Oh, we certainly will.
Yeah.
As long as they're willing to come back, we're more than happy to have them.
Great.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Okay, question burning here. Parents, teachers, grandparents, adults who are around kids. I hear this again and again. They frustrate me. I can't understand. How do you speak to that?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a parent, to somebody who is looking at these kids, the details of life? I mean, whether it be on their mobile phone or on a game system or just their music and so forth. It's like walls go up.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, another lesson I could say I've learned from youth ministry is how pivotal parenting is in the life of a young person. I am not a parent, and I always make sure that's known when I'm counseling a parent because I have not experienced that, and I want to be very respectful of the, I'm sure, highs and lows of parenting. But you ask a great question. How can we pour into our young people when most of the times we can only find ourselves being frustrated?
And disconnected.
And disconnected, yeah. And I think a couple things come to mind. One is that certainly by saying that we can learn from our young people, as I did, doesn't mean we shouldn't in any way lessen the priority of parenting. Parenting, and one way I've heard it is that it's like for a young person when they sit in a roller coaster, okay? I know that I've ridden roller coasters a few times, and there's that anticipation that comes with getting on the ride. And really what you want is a thrill, right? You say to yourself, I want a thrill, I want to have fun, I want to do things I normally couldn't do, like go way high and drop down low and spin around. I just want to have a thrill. But every time that I get into the cart, into the seat, the first thing I do is I check to make sure I'm safe. And I may say I really want a thrill, but I'm shaking that as hard as I can. You know, I'm kind of trying to squeeze through to make sure, okay, let me make sure I'm safe.
Not going to fall out.
Right. Young people are doing that with parents often. They're doing this. They're saying, well, let's see how much I can move and still be safe. But let me make sure that as I pursue my adventuresome life, first and foremost, I want to know I'm safe. And so I remind parents of teenagers that your young person might be pushing you a little bit, but really they want to know they're safe. They want to know that mom and dad are there for me, and sometimes that even means that they're going to put their foot down. They want to know that they're not alone in this, that they do have their parents watching over and protecting them. Now, that being said, they don't always express that, right?
Well, yeah.
You know, part of the challenge is kids need to form their own identity.
Absolutely.
And the idea is that they test the person they're emotionally connected to. And so the parents should hopefully be able to provide, you know, some sort of firm boundaries.
Absolutely.
But some parents can't do that.
Yeah.
And the outcome of that down the road is if a child, a teenager doesn't rebel, and it doesn't mean acting out, but means questioning against the parents, they'll do it against those they're emotionally connected to later on in life.
Sure.
And that's the cause of many divorces.
Yeah.
Because kids don't get their own identity in that. So you're right in the middle of all this, encouraging parents to be able to understand that.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important for parents to remember that they are modeling for their children how to pour a relationship into somebody. And what I mean by that is, while, yes, I'm the parent and you're the child, which creates some automatic assumptions about the relationship, I have an authority, absolutely. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to show you that you're valuable too. I want to listen to you still. I don't only speak to you, I want to hear you. Your voice matters. Now, at the end of the day, if we're in disagreement, I'm still the parent. But I want to model that with people, all people. We want to always listen. We want to value their opinion. We want to care. And oftentimes, that's the biggest hurdle into coming to an agreement together. Because sometimes if we'll just listen to our children and hear their hearts, it can actually lead to a better understanding and therefore a better relationship.
Some parents tend to be very authoritative, and others are very authoritarian. What do you think of the, parents who are very controlling?
Yeah. Of course, every family's unique, and so I don't want to sit here and just say, oh, it's easy as 1, 2, 3. Again, parenting is unique with every situation, and I'm sure the most enjoyable and yet challenging experience anybody can face. But yeah, I do think that we want to make sure our young people always know you can come to me. And I realize you're not going to be perfect. And I want you to always know that I'm a safe person to talk to. Absolutely. As a parent, there may be times it's best for you to have your phone taken away or not go to that event. I remember one of the most frustrating moments for me as a teenager was my mom would not let me go to my class's New Year's party because she said, Aren, and she typically didn't keep me from too many social events. I was a well-behaved kid. She had grown trust in me. But she said, because you are not able to spend the night there, the boys couldn't spend the night, it was hosted by a girl, I don't want you on the roads around midnight when your party ends on New Year's. It's not safe at that time, and so you can't go. Oh, I was livid. I was so frustrated. Mom, don't you trust me? Well, yes, I trust you. Well, Mom, what are the chances that, Mom this, Mom that? And she said, and she looked at me with care in her eyes. So she did put her foot down, but in a loving way, and she looked at me and she said, I understand that you're frustrated, but I'm sorry. I look back on that now, and I'm so grateful for how she handled it. Because she kept me safe, but allowed me to know that I was loved at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, Aren, it's interesting. I was talking to a paramedic. He claimed that up to 40% of the drivers on the road after midnight have alcohol in their bodies.
Wow.
Up to 40%.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have a wise mother.
And Leigh, I know that you work at the medical center as a chaplain, and I got to spend a unit of chaplaincy at the hospital working with you as well. And you see a lot of things that you realize how scary it can be out there.
Yes.
But that leads to another part too, which is, well, you also can't put them in bubble wrap, stick them in a corner until they're an adult, right?
Yeah.
There needs to be some sort of a space to allow them to grow and, like Leigh said, make their own identity. And so that's part of the journey as well, is finding out, well, how much can I let them walk and run on their own? And young people do need to, at times, know that they are trusted to make good decisions so they can step up to that trust and build it.
You know, Derrell is an excellent parent. He has a bunch of kids.
I have 4.
Wow, yeah.
And they all still talk to you?
Oh, yeah. Well,
I say that you're joking, but you'd be surprised the number of kids who, for whatever reason, there's estrangement between.
you know, I've seen that. And I've seen that since my kids were little. There were, I can't tell you how many times when my kids were like in grade school and so on, young, friends at school with bad family situations or no family situation at all in some cases, really. And they would end up bringing a friend home and be like, Dad, he needs you to be a dad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm actually the youngest of 4. And I was raised by a single mother. My dad was not in the picture after I was about 5 years old. And so we had a difficult family situation. And I was often the friend in your illustration who had mentors, whether they be my friends' parents, teachers, sports coaches, all kinds of roles. I was in the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program as a little brother. And that's something that I was mentioning, was the importance of mentors in my life. And so when you think of it in a Christian context, in the context of church, how beautiful an opportunity it is to all be big brothers, big sisters, and mentors to our young people, and to make them think that, yeah, you are a young person, I'm in a different generation, but we absolutely still can have a relationship, and I am there for you. And the expectation is not perfection. Look, none of us were perfect when we were young people.
No.
None of us were. And so when a young person knows that if I'm imperfect, I'm still accepted and loved by not only my parents and my friends' parents, but the elders in my church, it makes a world of difference.
You know, Derrell, youth pastors play a very important role in raising kids. Once kids hit the early preteen, teen years, parents are not enough. They need other people in their lives. And some studies show it needs 6 or 7 other adults in a child's life to be there for them. And you know, some parents think they can do it all alone. Folks, you can't. You need other people in the lives of kids. And a church with a youth pastor is so valuable in terms of doing that.
Yeah, I often say that my job is just to be one support of many in a young person's life. Of course, the predominant one, the parents or the guardians, but I just play a small role. But if all of us can think of ourselves in that way, as helping to shepherd and foster healthy young people, it will make a world of difference.
But one of the things about U.S. society is the individualism. And a lot of collective societies, you've got uncles and aunts and cousins, everybody all around.
Right.
And they can help. But in our society where it's so individualistic, it's more important to be able to reach out.
Absolutely.
School, teachers, coaches, youth pastors, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mentioned being raised by a single mother, 4 kids, and if not for coaches who were willing to drive me home, my big brothers from the program who were willing to help give me new experiences, taking me to ball games or the zoo or whatever it was, teachers who would spend extra time with me to help study. And make no mistake, I have a tremendous mother. And I'm a little bit biased, but I think she's right up there, one of the top in the world. But she did everything she could, but she also knew that point, that it takes a village.
Yes.
And you're right, in America, we don't often ascribe to that. We like the idea that we can do it on our own.
Yes.
We are fully independent, we can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's so important to acknowledge that there are resources, there are other people who care and love us.
Yes.
And I see that as my job, to just be an aid to the parent. But I want to emphasize that in church communities especially, even if we're not on the pastoral staff, we can think of that as well. How can we create connections that are healthy and supportive of our young people? And I want to acknowledge how Christian Connections is having young people lead us in music and how talented they are. And we have a young person directing this program right now, and how incredible that is. And so I think you guys are on the right track, and I think it's a wonderful example of our church.
And I think, well, to a point that you made regarding the village, the group. I didn't grow up in the United States. I grew up in a foreign country as well.
Which one?
And Belize.
Wow.
And I come from a big family. there's 17 of us siblings. And older siblings raised younger siblings pretty much throughout it. And I noticed, though, coming to the United States, people just disperse. It takes more than family. You don't have the uncles and aunts and everybody around necessarily like you might in some places. They're all dispersed. And then it becomes even more important for teachers, for Sabbath school teachers, for just other people, around to notice and jump in.
Yeah, and I should probably mention that the reason I was able to have those mentors in my life, the teachers, the coaches, was because I got enrolled in Adventist education. My family's not Seventh-day Adventist. It was, to make a long story short, my grandmother, who was Presbyterian, had heard good things about the local Adventist school, and so she said to my mom, hey, we should send the kids to this school. And that's when I was in first grade. Then, unfortunately, my grandmother passed away at the end of that year, and she was paying the tuition, so we got pulled out. And I finished elementary and public school, but when junior high came about, my mom said, I really would love for my kids to go back to that Adventist school. And through the help of the church and the school and others, we were able to continue going to the Adventist school, and I got plugged into the village. I got plugged into community. And our church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, having an Adventist schooling system, I think is so wonderful, and I hope we continue to support that when we can, because I know it's changed my life for good. I wouldn't be here without it. But so many other young people I work with. Now, that's not to say that Adventist education is the only way to go by any means, but it's an example of how the community and the village can make all the difference. And that's an example of kind of a collectivist culture within our individualistic culture in America.
That's so true about Christian education. A lot of independent churches, sometimes put on, have schools connected to them, Christian schools and that. But the main thing is that your mother put you back in, and here you are, a pastor.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I go to Adventist school to finish out. I was able to graduate thanks to, again, the incredible support financially of many people who poured into the Adventist school. Was able to graduate, and I went to Pacific Union College in the Napa Valley, one of our Adventist schools. Loved that school. Was studying journalism to be a sports writer. And I was halfway through, and I had gotten involved in a lot of ministries and experiences, and that's when I realized, there would be such fulfillment in walking alongside young people, just like mentors walked alongside me.
Wow.
And that's kind of when it shifted for me. And it certainly, none of it would have happened if not for the Adventist school and my mom, who also made a lot of sacrifices to put me and my siblings through that school as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And, I think that one of the situations that I hear a lot, from people around me, is the disconnect in interests.
Yeah.
You know, what I was interested in doing when I was a kid, what I remember, what I can identify with, I can't identify with. You know, these kids, I can't. I can't really connect to.
Absolutely.
To this.
And I'll tell you, you know, I'm a little bit younger than you, but it's the same for me. So many of these things that young people care about now, I'm very ignorant on. But you know what I've discovered? Is it means the world to young people when we just make the effort.
Try.
So sometimes I'll say to a teenager, I've heard this thing is really big right now. I don't know, it could be a movie, or it could be a book series, or it could be a new gadget or something. I got no idea what that means. And they might roll their eyes and say, Pastor Aren, how do you not know? You're not with it. You know, they learn very quickly I'm not cool, which I'm not. But I say, well, tell me about it. And I listen, and they explain it, and I still don't get it. But the fact that I even make the effort means the world. And I think all of us can at least make the effort
So this
to
is
show
something
interest.
that parents, teachers, people who feel that disconnect, at least ask, try.
It's been said that we all should pay relational rent before moving into somebody's life, and that includes taking interest in what they care about, such as in my example, bird watching, which I still know nothing about. But the fact that I made the effort made, I think, a lot of difference in our relationship.
Wow, Well, it's interesting looking at how things turn out with some little seeds being planted and communities being built and lives being changed. Derrell.
Well, you know, okay, I've when I moved to the United States, I had never had video games or internet or anything like that before. And I moved to the United States as a teenager, and video games were just coming in. They weren't online or anything, but they were just coming in, and I was fascinated by them. And got my first computer and programmed my own first games on the thing. So so I always had an interest in that, and I still game online. And one thing I've run into, there is groups of people online who actually take an interest and who on there will, you know, talk with and mentor. There are kids. It is a community actually, and the online community, which is a big thing. Kids wouldn't call it new, but it is new to me.
Sure.
The online community kind of levels things to a certain extent. You know?
Absolutely.
If you can connect to something on there, you know, then they're happy to talk. And I've noticed, you know, I was in a game with a group, and I heard what had to be a little kid in the group, and I noticed the time, and I was like, you know, do you live in the United States? Because if you do, you need to go to bed. This is late. You need to log off and go to bed. And you know, he laughed about it. They laughed about it, and then the rest of the people in the group started calling me Dad. They're like, "Okay, Dad." But you know,
it's community.
It's community. It's connection.
Absolutely. And then what I appreciate about what you shared is sharing your experience about you coming to the United States and programming your first, you know, game or program. And so that's another point, which is we want to listen to the experiences of young people, and it's okay for us to share ours with them. And as I was mentioning, we would be surprised at how interested they'll be to hear it.
And they are. I mean, the fact that a person, you know, it may not be what they do now, but it's close enough that they're like, oh, you're a game developer? Well, maybe not quite. But
well, Derrell, now that you've confessed that you're a gamer, how can parents make sure that the online games that their kids are playing are safe? What are some things to look for?
Well, I mean, that varies with a parent's, you know, what what their values are and the lines that they draw. One of the first things that any parent can do when it comes to any game there is, Google it and or YouTube it, because there are a lot of gamers online, and you can watch some of the games, you can listen to the conversation, you can see the gameplay, and make your decision not just based on hearsay or just the look of the game case or whatever.
So parents should be involved if their kids are
Absolutely. Go online and do your research.
I know you game with your kids. Do you still do that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is almost daily.
Cool.
And my kids are here and there around the country now, and we
Wow.
all come together on the Xbox and spend time talking. And
Yeah. See, it's a little bit different than it used to be, but there's a lot of beauty in that, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, we hear so many negative things about online gaming, but what you're saying is there are positive aspects to it.
oh yeah, you can turn gaming into a family thing. It always has been for me and my kids. They were raised on games, and we had family time. Of course, we had outside playtime and so on as well. But it's something that to this day, my kids are grown up now, but to this day, it's something that we all come together and still do.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a legacy that you've created, Derrell.
Some people might not be as thrilled about that, but
It works for you and your family.
yes, it does.
Well, the conversations, talking about gaming, and there's so many people that are very negative about gaming. But what you're saying is it can be positive if parents take the time to do some research
Yeah.
and know about the game and maybe even join in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think no matter what it is, communication is
Well, you jump in, and then you have some influence in there. If you don't jump in, if you're not a part of it, your influence on that aspect of their life, and they're going to game one way or another, your influence on that aspect of their life is gone. At least for that part of it. You really don't have much say if you don't know.
I was intrigued you said they're going to game anyway. And I think you're right. Kids will game. And so rather than making them go behind your back, hopefully that's not happening, but be involved, and maybe parents could even get involved in some of the games. Now you talked about Xbox. I mean, are there other ways of doing that? I mean,
there's on the phones, there's PlayStation and Switch and a whole bunch of gaming systems, but they all are pretty much all online, where there's people are together. Whether you're spread out across the country or around the world, or
And I would suggest to any parent who realizes gaming is a big part of their kid's life, if it's not part of that parent's life, to say, hey, I notice you love this game. Tell me about it. What do you like about it? Explain to me. And what are the storylines? And what is it? And oh, you have friends on there. Tell me about these friends. When young people feel that their parents are involved in it, then it becomes a much safer place naturally, as opposed to something they need to hide or lie about, right?
And you're in a position to do that, in terms of parents coming to you. Because I think there's such a negative stereotype about gaming amongst certain communities. And that. So
and sometimes for good reason, of course. But I think this is just a microcosm of a bigger truth, which is that the more that we can be open in our communication with young people, step into their world, make them think it's safe to tell us about their interests, their passions, of course, even their struggles. The healthier relationships we'll have, not only with their own children, but with any young people that we can have influence upon.
Now, Calamasa Church tends to be very pro-kids, and I know for a fact that you guys go on mission trips every now and then. And you take kids from, what, 10 or less?
So we each summer do a mission trip with the high school group. Our church also does a mission trip to Roatan, Honduras each summer, which is coming up again to do dental and medical and VBS and such, but our youth group alone, our high school group, we do a mission trip just for the high school students. We go to, most years, Los Angeles, where we learn about how to serve in different ways there. Serving the homeless, serving at daycares to help parents who need help, serving the elderly, all kinds of people. And that's a great, I appreciate bringing that up, because to tell young people today, let's take a week out of your summer vacation to go and sleep on the floor and not have hot showers and go serve people all day until we're so tired we can barely stand. What do you say? And every year our trip fills up. So young people love service. They do. They want opportunities to put their faith into action. I think more so than any generation we've seen before. They're eager to not just make it a cognitive experience, that being faith, but to put it into action. And the mission trip's a great example of that. So that's another thing churches can do, is creating opportunities to serve.
Well, and that's one thing that our time is coming to an end here, but you know, that's one thing that here at LLBN is a way for some of us to serve. It's run primarily by volunteers who have a passion for something, and it's something that we can do. And in fact, coming up next week, May 20 through 23, we have a series on the Great Commission. And that commission says to go out and do. Go out and do something. Be active. And take the gospel to every nation, to every language, to the world. And that's something that we're committed to here. And we are grateful for our partners out there who have joined with us in every way that they can to be a part of this. You know, from cameras, directing, sitting on the set here talking, office work, we're all part of the body. And although you may be thousands of miles away or hundreds of miles away, when you participate by financially supporting this ministry through your prayers, you're a part of this body. And all of us, including this ministry, are parts of the greater body, which is God's world, His people. Thank you for being with us, and look forward to seeing you next time, right here on LLBN.